Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, and welcome to our webinar. This is the very warm welcome to our audience and also to our lovely panel of current students. I'm your host. My name is Yola Mar, and I would like to say a big thank you for taking the time to join us here today, as we will be talking about relocating to UCD and to Ireland. In my role here in the Smurfit School as the International Student Liaison Officer, I look after all international students studying in the school. Over 60% of our students come to us from overseas, approximately from over 60 countries. So it's a very, very global campus. I look after the students here, supporting them with their move to Ireland. I provide immigration advice. I help settling in Ireland and also here at the university. I organize events which help with integration of all students here on campus, and I'm just get involved with very many different student engagement activities as well. So today's session, we'll have two lovely current students who will be here on the panel today, and they'll share their stories, and they also will give us tips on how they have survived and traveled their journey coming to us here from their home countries. And very end of the session, we will have a Q&A, a short Q&A session. So what I would like to do now is ask you to look at the bottom of the screen into the Q&A channel, and you're very welcome to submit your questions. You can do it throughout the session, and we'll look at them at the very end and try to answer as many as possible. Okay. So I'd like to welcome Wendy and Joseph here to the screen. Hello, hi guys. Wendy is currently undertaking the MSc in International Business, and Joe is here on the MSc Management Program. Hi, guys.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for coming to us. You can talk more about yourselves and your experiences in a second. So before we kick off, I would like to just remind everyone whom to contact here in the school. So if your query relates to an application, so whether it's your transcript or any other questions that you might have relating to the application that you have submitted or you're about to submit, please contact my colleagues in the admissions team, which is smurfit.admissions@ucd.ie. And if you have a question relating to moving to Ireland, studying in UCD, visa, travel, accommodation, please don't be shy and drop me a line. I can be contacted at yola.mar@ucd.ie. So we'll do a kickoff now and invite our two lovely students. And thank you. Now, Wendy, could you very briefly introduce yourself and tell us why you've decided to study in Smurfit? Give us maybe 2 to 3 factors that made you decide to come to Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Wendy. I'm currently a part of the MSc International Business program here at Smurfit. I'm from the United States, California to be specific, and I went straight from undergrad. I graduated from the University of California, Santa Barbara with a double major in Chinese and economics, and went straight to Ireland after that. Why I chose Ireland?
Why Ireland? Why UCD one?
I guess I think because it was a triple accredited school, so that meant my degree counted in a lot of different places, which was really important for me, especially wanting to work in a lot of different countries in the future. Second, I guess studying international business, I got into schools in America, but it made sense to do that internationally. And third, Ireland is just a lovely place to be. So I would definitely recommend studying in Ireland to anybody that can.
You're enjoying it. That's great. A million. Joseph, what are your thoughts? Would you introduce yourself and tell us why Ireland, why Smurfit?
Hey, I grew up in Colorado in the US, but I also lived for a while and my parents are from Germany. And so I was living in Germany, working for a few years prior to Smurfit. And there were a few reasons why Smurfit specifically was the right choice, partly the triple accreditation actually, but also because of the reputation of the school and the fact that it was accessible. So, I mean, it was in English and it seemed like it was a relatively friendly and open community. not just culturally, but also the administration seemed to be responsive and the school itself seemed to help students. That's just the impression I got at first glance. And I wanted to transition from a humanities background, which limited my professional, promotion prospects into business. So that was my.
That's great. It sounds like you've done a lot of research. Thanks so much. So in terms of the journey that you have traveled coming to UCD, if you were to talk to the prospective students, what would you say, when and how should the students prepare for starting in August? So specifically, when can they start or should they start? And what would be the first 3 steps for them to do? What do you think, Wendy?
Yeah, definitely my first 3 steps were just a lot of research. So I would say research your professors, the extracurricular activities that are offered, like the GLP program and Icd. Those are definitely 2 programs that you should look into. Just a lot of research on visa requirements, all of that. Second for me was definitely looking for accommodation. That's something that I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, but was super important and super crucial and is a little stressful, but I'm sure it will all work out for all of you. And third, I would say definitely get your resume ready. Get your resume ready and get your LinkedIn profile ready, because as soon as school starts, you start really applying to places, networking, and you want to have those things ready.
There's a lot of career fairs starting really soon, immediately, a couple of weeks after your semester starts. You're fully into your job market and you're encouraged to apply and engage with prospective employers. How about you, Joseph? You seem to have done a lot of research about the school. Well, how did you prepare for starting in August? Like your first 3 things that you would have done?
Yeah, well, I moved here a few months early and continue to work online.
Okay.
For me, I think, for all students, but the approach I took was to find a map of the public transit system. I realized I wouldn't be driving, and commuting can make or break a morning class. And so I looked at the DART map, I looked at the bus map, and that informed where my accommodations would be. So I paid attention to the layout of the city and what my environment would be, and then my accommodations. And after all that, I could kind of relax because I'd figured out enough of the city to be certain that I'd be in the right place with my apartment and whatnot. And then I looked at extracurriculars and everything.
Lovely, thank you so much. So how would you have any tips organizing your relocation? For example, for accommodation, what exactly did you do? How did you prepare? What do you mean by saying that you've done your research, Joseph?
Actually, I used Google Maps to.
So you know where you are, you know where you want to live, to take 1 rather than 5 buses to get to. Okay.
That was a big part of it for me. But once I did that, I looked at whether or not I could live with any people from my course through Facebook mainly. And I tried to find an apartment with people in my course, but it's hard before a program to make that happen. A few people from our course actually moved after the first semester to live with friends, but I ended up finding an apartment within my price range that was pretty close to campus, and it was relatively simple once I got the factors down.
Okay, how long did it take you to find a place to live? Was it a long time? A lot of people
from start
struggle.
to finish, it was about 6 weeks, yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying, some students have found temporary accommodation to start with, and then found, others to share a place with from possibly their class or the school, and then moved into something slightly more permanent. Perfect. How about yourself, Wendy? What's your journey? What's your story?
So I had a very different experience. I, being the type of person that I am, was on rent.ie and dapp.ie, probably starting in April, contacting just apartment places and realtors directly. And then no one really wanted to talk to me until I was actually in Ireland, which is what I found.
That is so true.
So it was a little frustrating because I was ready to sign a lease, even digitally, but it wasn't something I could do until I got to Ireland, which is in my opinion, maybe something that makes like the student accommodations private, the private student accommodations, as well as like the actual campus accommodation, maybe a little bit more appealing to some, because you know you have an accommodation when you get there. Whereas I got to Ireland and I booked about 2 weeks in a hotel Airbnb just to look for accommodation. I ended up getting really lucky. I contacted a real estate agent, Bell Properties. They were fantastic. And I ended up finding an apartment in 3 days. So that's very much unheard of. I've heard of people being like 6 weeks, a month, month and a half. So it just really depends. But I would say definitely be prepared for the longer aspect rather than the shorter aspect.
Yeah, so I suppose also what the students would have said to me in the past is do come early, because if you don't, you end up looking at houses while your classes are on, and it's the frustration of having this big job of finding a place to live while you are actually already commencing your program. Incredibly frustrating. So what I recommend is come early. Like in the past, we used to say 2 weeks early. I think now it must be even earlier than 2 weeks. 2 weeks is not enough.
Yeah, and definitely too, when we came, COVID was kind of, the lockdowns was just starting to release. So there was still the question of COVID. So I came about a little bit more than a month early.
Okay.
I would definitely recommend that to anybody else to come a month early, because then that gives you time to not only look for apartments, but also to explore Ireland, to figure out how to get to campus, to figure out where your grocery stores are. A lot of learning living in a different country if you've never done that before. So a month was the perfect amount of time for me.
That's a great tip. Yes, thank you so much. And I suppose what we as a university always advise is do not pay any money, don't pay the deposit unless you physically see the place. Okay, that's really important.
Sorry, one more thing. It was super helpful. I actually contacted some of UCD before I was there, because my friends and I were being shown an apartment while we were still in America, and they offered to go to the place and make sure it was legit. So I don't recommend bombarding UCD with doing that, but UCD was extremely helpful with accommodations.
That's great to hear. That's really good to hear. Thank you so much. So I have one more question, and it's kind of a tricky one. If you were to start your master's now this September 2022, what would you do differently? Is there anything that you would like to know ahead of coming that you didn't know? Is there anything, or are you really happy with what you've done, with your story? Or is there something that you've learned later going, that's really interesting. I kind of wish I had known that. Joseph.
Yeah, I can think of two things. One of them is kind of out there, but it's a little bit hard to find extracurriculars before they start. So, if you want to get engaged in a sports team, if you want to join a club, if you want to join a leadership program, or I know that there's the Icd program, which I'm not in, but if you want to do these activities, it's important to know about them first, because you might hear about them right before the deadline. And, you have the time to apply in that period of time, but it's good to know what's coming up. And the second thing is, I think that something you should do in general, but particularly before these programs, because they kind of give you a big, foundational set of knowledge. It's helpful to have some sense of what industry you might want to go into, or at least what you might find interesting after you graduate, because you're going to get so much information and a lot of it might seem kind of generic. It might be hard to apply it without some inspiration, or at least some idea of specific roles or industries you'd want to go into. That will certainly help you apply your knowledge.
Brilliant. So a bit of a self-reflection. Thank you so much. And just to mention to all the audience, Icd is Intercultural Development Program. So that's a program open to all students here in the school. If you have inquire about it, would like to know more, just drop me an email. How about yourself, Wendy?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing the Icd program. It won silver in the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative that was going off around a lot of universities. So definitely recommend doing that. Things I knew I wanted to know beforehand. A graduate program, coming from the States, I didn't know what a graduate program was. I thought it was like another master's. So when people said, get ready to apply for graduate programs, I didn't understand that meant like jobs. I thought that meant another school. And I was like, why would I do that? So definitely get prepared to apply to those because they start accepting applications in September or October. I would say, again, definitely get your resume ready. I was not prepared with that. And definitely, last thing, I think you should definitely use the career services more than I did. Now, like December until now, I had a meeting with them almost every single week, but I wish I was done in October.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. On our SIS Web Incoming Students Portal, that's a platform, that's where your profile, your UCD profile is, where your modules will be appearing, your fees, etc., etc. That's where there's a tab called Incoming Students Portal, and all the information about the extracurricular activities like the Global Leadership Program, which is the GLP program, or ICD, the Intercultural Development Program, and also about careers as well. There's a big tab, careers, and that links you up to the careers office. So do that research as well. So it's not just researching the accommodation and the very basics, the logistics of arriving in Ireland, but also dig deeper. That's what you're saying, and kind of have a slightly higher awareness of what's happening. So you're kind of ready and get hungry for getting involved and getting engaged, really, isn't it? Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much. So what we might do is look at questions that they have been submitted to us. When we have a look, thank you so much that Kathy, colleague of mine, is here checking out any questions that you guys have submitted to us.
Great, Yola. Yeah, there's a couple of questions, a lot around, I suppose, accommodation and, recommendations over choosing campus accommodation or off-campus accommodation, which is most economical or easy to access. So perhaps, Yola, do you want to maybe take that question?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. So yeah, there is a question I can see. How does the on-campus accommodation different from off-campus? So I suppose the first thing that it's quite striking is the on-campus accommodation is the convenience. There is no commute, there's no travel, and also the convenience of it's guaranteed. So you can safely book it prior to arrival and it's there. So when you come, you can relax. There's no searching for a place to live. And also there's no commute, so you're saving time. In terms of economically, it tends to be slightly more expensive, and I suppose it's because of the convenience of it. And we have one building called Proby House that's dedicated to Smurfit students. So also that's kind of a nice, I suppose, environment for a community that's being built there on campus. But in terms of accommodation, I think the mantra that we have been always saying is come early. Do not allow the accommodation search overlap with start of program. It is incredibly frustrating if you are facing a choice of do I view a house or do I go to lecture, because obviously you will have to go to your lectures. So I suppose it's a very general question. For specific information, I would invite students to drop me an email. Also on the SIS Web Incoming Students Portal, which is open since January now. So there is loads of information. There's this International Students Guide with about 35 pages of advice after advice after advice. So some of it, or a lot of it, relates to accommodation.
And Yola, just related to that, for campus accommodation, when are the rate lists or the costings typically issued for the coming academic year?
I would imagine that it should be available now. If you basically look for UCD residences, UCD accommodation, and you Google fees, you should be able to find them already. Mm-hmm. They will be similar enough to what the rates were the previous year.
Yeah, perfect.
Give you a rough estimate of how much it would be.
Yes, perfect. And another accommodation question: with on-campus accommodation, are you staying with graduate master's students or general UCD students?
That's an excellent question. So as I mentioned earlier, there's one building that here on campus, on the Smurfit campus, that is solely dedicated to Smurfit students. So you will not be living with undergraduate students. And also the Smurfit campus is a standalone separate campus for graduate business students. There is a small building where there's other students in it, but the majority of the students here are Smurfit students. The main campus is 4 kilometers away. Obviously, being a UCD student, you're entitled to use all the facilities, and you can also live on main campus if you wish. Suppose that it's slightly more lively, where there's a gym there as well. So there's advantages of living on either of the campuses as well.
Great. A question as well about visas. So as an international student coming to Ireland that doesn't require a visa, are you able to continue to stay in Ireland and apply for jobs post-graduation? And does the student provide guidance on visa?
Absolutely. I think that's probably that question that Wendy could take, but just to give you an introduction, yes, as a student who does not require a visa to actually enter Ireland, what you will be required to do is to register with immigration authorities. So apply for Irish residence permit, which would give you validity for over a year, and post completion. So it's not post graduation, as our graduation takes place in December, but post completion. So in September, when your results are released, you will be able to apply for what's called a third level graduate program. It's a 2 years visa that entitles you to work in Ireland post completion of your master's. It's called it's also called Stamp 1G or Stay Back visa. There's different names that it's being called. Wendy, would you have anything to add to it?
I think you covered most of it. I know that the immigration office was a little bit behind for my year. So
with the pandemic, yes.
With the pandemic, so people were checking pretty much every day at all hours of the day in order to get an appointment.
For appointments.
I was lucky, but definitely that's one of the first things you should do when you get to Dublin is try and schedule that appointment, just so you don't have to worry about it later. And then in terms of staying after, I think you covered most of it. I think you do have to, is there another application form after you like complete your course just to get that 1G stamp? But it's
yes, there is. It's being completed online though, so there's no need for an appointment.
Okay, perfect.
Comfortable. And what we normally would do is in early July, we would flag it to students coming to us from outside EU that they will need to start looking for appointments. So even then, still early July, but to get an appointment for end of August or September, you can actually start looking at those appointments in early summer. Okay.
Great.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, another question that came in was around sort of average monthly expenses. I'm not sure, do we provide any guidance on that in advance, Yola?
There is guidance on the UCD website, and I think in my handbook as well. I couldn't quote it at the top of my head, but I suppose the best advice, because obviously we all have different needs and different lifestyles, would be probably just to check the UCD website. So that would be cost of living UCD. If you Google that, hopefully you find it. If you don't, please send me an email.
Great. Would Wendy or Joseph have a view on that yourselves from your own student experience?
Good question.
Yeah, I would say sometimes there are lots of websites that will compare the country you live in with Ireland or another country as far as basic expenses. And sometimes it's even, they'll compare like the sandwich, like a Big Mac price in Dubai versus Dublin. So if you want to get a feel for how much your average like disposable expenses will be, that's a good measure. And also it's easier to have roommates. You should plan for that if you want to live off campus. But at least for myself, it's about 50%, 60% of my daily costs is my room and board. So
great. Again, a lot of questions still coming in around accommodation and where to search outside of on-campus accommodation. So I know, Wendy, you mentioned Daft. Are there other portals, Yola, that we would direct people to for off-campus accommodation searches?
Yeah, before I hand over to the students, what I've done is I've put together a very comprehensive guide called a handbook for international students. And there's testimonials, videos of testimonials from students, the likes of Wendy and Joseph, and there's loads of links as well. So they're literally linked up, and I would welcome and would invite you to just take a look at it. You can find that a link to that guide on the SIS Web Incoming Students portal.
That's great.
How about you, Wendy? What would you, is there any other website, or because you said you've used a real estate agent?
Yeah, so definitely daff.ie or rent.ie. I think we both mentioned those ones. I looked at, because in America it's different. You go through a real estate agent and then they help you. Whereas you kind of, you have to do all the searching yourself, and then the specific real estate agent will work with you about setting up a time. I also went through a few real estate agents, like contacting them directly. I believe one was Owen Riley, and another, the one that I actually like got fire with, was Bell Properties. Their names were Adeline and Graham. So
okay. It would be local as well. So estate agents work in local specific areas. But I suppose the way it works in Ireland, yes, that there is the main sort of websites, depositories, and that's where estate agents advertise themselves as much as private vendors as well. So I'd say that probably would be your first step, is look at those two websites as well. Well, how about yourself, Joseph? Have you any other resources that you have used?
It wasn't easy. I think I used the same website as Wendy. I went through a real estate agent as well. And I would just say that distance does not necessarily equal commute time because of the way the public transit system works. So like, be really conscientious about where you look, because it could be that, you know, if you look a little bit north of campus, it's a really long commute. But if you look way north of campus, it's a really short commute. So it really does get confusing.
That's a really good tip. And I suppose I liked your initial tip, is look at the transport system and identify where you can or want to live in terms of the commuting distance and the transport infrastructure. That's a really good tip. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make, Joseph, because Blackrock Village has very good services and connectivity is good. There is a train service called the DART that runs to the city centre and out further south into the suburbs. So it's a very good way to get to campus, and equally bus connections. So do, again, I suppose I couldn't emphasize enough the need to, as Yola, Wendy and Joseph had said, is time and starting your search early and doing your
arriving
homework.
early. Absolutely, yeah. Because your search when you're at home, I don't think any real estate agent will want to engage with you or any prospective landlord if you tell them that you're abroad. And I suppose I have one more tip for when you are here and when you're going and either viewing a place or else sending an email with an inquiry. There's two things that I recommend you say. Number one is, I am already in Ireland, because if it's not very, very obvious, nobody will want to talk to you if they presume that you're not here. And number two, say that you are a Smurfit school student and introduce yourself as a graduate student in a business school, because that gives you a kind of elevates your status, not status, but your profile as a student. You're not an undergraduate student who will be partying. It's a really busy program. And also the school has a fantastic reputation in this country, as much as abroad as well. So I think that will also set the tone of your conversation with a prospective landlord or an estate agent. I can see a question about on-campus accommodation, whether there is, how many people will be sharing kitchen and bathrooms in Proby House. So the Proby House, which is the dedicated space for Smurfit students, there tends to be 5 rooms in like an apartment setting. And there's a common room or kind of a like living room come kitchen. So it's kind of large space to be shared for those 5 students. And each of the bedrooms has their own bathroom. So you would not be sharing a bathroom, but you'd be sharing a kitchen. That's also good to know.
Great. I'm conscious of time, Yola, but maybe just one question. Wendy, you mentioned about the Icd program, which is offered to all master's students, and the Global Leadership Program. Just in relation to the Icd program, maybe would you be able to comment how it maybe has helped you in terms of, because obviously it's a very multicultural student population here. We've over 60 countries represented, well over 50% of our student cohort is international. So it'd be good just if you could in 30 seconds tell us how it's helped and what you've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. One more thing about housing, definitely identify yourself as a student. I offered to pay more in my security deposit just so that the landlord would have faith in me because of how competitive a market was. So if that's something you're able to do, I recommend doing that. In terms of ICD, there's a bunch of different levels that you can do depending on your time commitment and time availability. It has taught me quite a few things, especially the in-person workshops. Definitely recommend going. They are awesome. You meet a lot of amazing people and you learn how to resolve conflict and manage a multinational team with a bunch of different cultures from all corners of the world, which I think is so valuable, especially when you're in Smurfit. Smurfit is a very international school. You're going to be in a team with someone who is not from the same country as you, not from the same background, not from the same, pretty much anything. You guys will be probably opposites. And it was really, really, really cool to understand where people were coming from with their different cultures and different identities. And ICD played a huge role in helping me do that.
That's great.
I don't know if that was 30 seconds or not, but I tried.
You did really well. Thank you, Menti. I think that's it in terms of questions, Yola. So I leave you to close.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kathy. So I would like to first of all say that this session is being recorded. So if any of you joined us late, you will be able to access a recording of the session on the Smurfit Schools YouTube channel very soon in the next few days. And I suppose I'd like to just wrap up and thank Wendy and Joseph and Kathy for your collaborations and for your help here at this webinar. And also I'd like to thank our audience for listening to us. And just to remind you guys, any questions you have, we're more than happy and more than welcome to drop us an email, and I'll be delighted to talk to you again, whether it's by email or whether you'd like to schedule a Zoom call. I'll be delighted to talk to you. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope to see you in Smurfit. Take care. Bye.